Welcome to the Really Know Your Customer podcast with your hosts, Betsy Westhafer and Tony Bodo. Join Betsy and Tony as they dive in with highly successful C-suite leaders who have grown successful organizations by creating a laser focus on listening to their customers and building deep customer relationships. Now, it's time to join Betsy and Tony for the Really Know Your Customer show.
Welcome to the Really Know Your Customer podcast. My name is Tony Bodo, CEO of Tony Bodo International.
And I'm Betsy Westhafer, CEO of the Congruity Group. We are so happy to have you here today and are so excited about this episode of our podcast.
Yeah, we are. Gail and Bruce are amazing. And this isn't going to be your typical Really Know Your Customer podcast. So let me just be right up front about that. We usually talk strategy. We're talking with CEOs. We're learning about their companies. And today we are talking with the CEO. But what we're doing in this is really diving into some rules and tactics that you can use in your team, in your leadership team, as well as all the way down through your organization to the frontline customer service person. And I don't want to spill the beans too early in this, but we're going to give you some very tactical, practical things you can use starting today. In fact, Betsy and I started using these right in the middle of the episode as we're learning the skills. And I will say, I've heard some of these before, and I've practiced some of them before, but you can never hear it too often. So with that, Betsy, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Yeah, Tony, I would say too, when you hear tactics, don't minimize the impact of that. It is deep thinking, it's science-based, it's hugely important for how you relate as a leader, how you relate with your customers, how you relate with your teammates. This is really, really important stuff. And as we talked about after we did the recording, actually, we talked about how these 4 things that Gail and Bruce Montgomery are going to walk us through really are the pillars of a culture within an organization. And I just find it to be fascinating conversation. Their backgrounds are fascinating. They are the epitome of fun people, which is awesome. And so without further ado, let's dive into the episode with Bruce and Gail Montgomery. Gail and Bruce Montgomery, welcome to the Really Know Your Customer podcast. We're so excited to have you here today. We need to let our audience know that this is going to be a high energy conversation, and get your creative hat on and enjoy the next 35, 40 minutes, because we have the honor of knowing Gail and Bruce. We have seen them live in different venues, and it's just amazing what they do, and we can't wait to jump in. So you guys, welcome to the show.
Awesome.
Yay,
Thank you for having us here. We're thrilled.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. So kick us off. Tell our listeners all about all things Gail and Bruce Montgomery, what you do, how you got to this point. You have a very interesting origin story. And so, let us get to know you guys a little bit better.
Okay.
I'll defer to my CEO. She's the most important in the room. So,
fancy talk. I might have to take you off that PIP.
Yes, that's right. We are married, just for the record. Full disclosure, we're married. We've been married a long time.
27 years we just celebrated. That's not so.
Yes.
Do not ask us what the secret to this marriage is, because we're still trying to figure that out.
It's a secret.
Shh. So real quick, so my background, I'll go first. I have a Bachelor of Fine Arts in Music Theater. You're welcome. And that has served me really well. I was a professional singer, dancer, actress in New York City for 7 years, temping at various different organizations. One of which led to a full-time job in corporate HR for a company called AIG. Maybe you've heard of them, big insurance company on Wall Street. I did recruitment back in the days when Monster finally came on the scene. It was like our first digital way of, finding resumes. Okay, stop talking. Anyway, point is, I did that. Then I became a mama. I had a couple babies and stayed home and raised some kids. And in between all that time, I became an executive director for a nonprofit arts organization, which was really an incredible learning opportunity for me. close to the thing I loved, which was the arts and also expanding my work world. Then I, had a couple of other little things here and there, getting my feet wet back in the corporate world, and ended up working for a SaaS startup tech company that was developing an HR information systems, or HRIS platform. I got to develop with another gal our entire change management and training and development piece of the business to offer to customers and help them devise communication plans and stakeholder journeys and all of that, which was really fun. And I also got my certification in emotional intelligence because I'm ridiculously passionate about people and how they work. And since IQ cannot really be increased over time, we know that emotional intelligence can. And so I did it mainly for me during COVID, and then am now a practitioner, so I can do assessments within organizations and help folks design action plans to just become better humans overall and better leaders. And then Bruce will tell you a little bit more about the company and how that started and his background, which involves then the creation of ExperienceYes, our company, of which I am the majority stakeholder in and CEO and co-founder. So it has been a great journey, and we now have a couple of adult children too. So
that's right.
I didn't stop being a parent, just so you know.
This is what an empty nest looks like. It's pretty awesome.
It is.
Yeah, that's right.
I have to say.
Yeah, it's great.
Bat it over to you, Bruce.
That's right. So yes, I'm Bruce Montgomery. I'm a Gemini. I like long walks on the beach, and I like data. So I have a similar background to Gail. I was a professional singer, dancer, actor in New York City. I have a Bachelor of Fine Arts in acting, not musical theater, but in acting.
Don't belittle it.
And I ended up in the technology space. So I spent years cutting my teeth after New York with a Big Five consulting firm. I ended up leading the IT organization for the second largest theater company in the country, called the Denver Center for the Performing Arts.
Woo-hoo.
I have a really deep interest in data and analytics. So I worked I ran key accounts for a data and analytics company that was focused on top tier sports and entertainment clients. So NFL, NBA, NASCAR, the Schubert Group, which was interesting.
Oh, read nerd alert.
Yes, I'm a big nerd. And while I was I got my MBA in 2013 from the University of Denver. And while I was there was an entrepreneurship track. And they kept asking, what do you love to do? And can you turn that into a business? What do you love to do? And can you turn that into a business? And Gail and I happened to start doing improv classes. We never did it when we were in New York City. We never did improv.
Strangely.
We found it in 2006. And in 2006, my brain went, I love doing improv. We had a class, and suddenly it was a very serious passion. And I realized while going through my MBA that if I could somehow tie realistic neuroscientific data of improv, what happens in your brain when you do improv, to a business, that you could then sell leadership sessions on how people can change the way their brain works, specifically leaders, that would be really interesting. And so we started ExperienceYes in 2013, and have been going strong for the last 8 or 9 years, which is crazy that it's been that long.
You guys, he just did math.
I did.
He said 8 or 9 years.
I did maths.
You did some maths. Well, so great story. I did not know that you didn't do improv when you were in New York. That's very interesting to me. I thought that was kind of the genesis of how you got to that. So that's very interesting that that's something more recent. So tell us about ExperienceYes, who you work with, the kinds of results you guys achieve with your clients, and just really, let's start diving into the really nerdy stuff, because I know that I'm interested and fascinated by it, and Tony will go way down the nerd path on my behalf. So go
my
for it.
My brethren right there, Tony. You are my kind of people.
We got this, Bruce.
Everyone.
We got this.
Well, so here's what I love. I made a joke about Bruce, nerd alert for Bruce. The truth is really that he has helped me recognize kind of the importance of data and how strong I guess, how strong a need it is within kind of showing your value as an organization.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when we first started, Bruce found this neuroscience study by a gentleman named Charles Lim out of Johns Hopkins. He's now at UCSF in San Francisco, where he basically put jazz musicians in a fMRI to see what happens in their brain when they improv versus when they're reading music and just playing, by rote. And Bruce got very excited because he was thinking to himself, hey, if what we do as comedians, as improv artists, is the same as maybe a jazz musician in terms of the way that the brain gets kind of disrupted and all these other neural pathways open up, maybe we can then show from a data perspective some of this disruptive play and experiential activities that we're doing and how they could affect leaders and teams. And so we built the whole business on a supposition that what we did was the exact same thing that these jazz musicians did. So we floated along like, yeah, this is a real thing. And this is data, even if it was tied just to musicians. And we started developing content that was all experiential. We wanted to be the not boring consulting company. Look, I mean, PwC and Deloitte and Touche, they're amazing and they're doing amazing things. And that is not us. We are, we're a small, nimble organization that relies on fun first. Fun comes first. We smash the box. We love the deep end. We love to jump in and put people in uncomfortable situations to get them more comfortable in ambiguity. So kind of to wrap it up and to answer your question, our clients are anyone who has people and anyone who needs those people to be higher performing, to feel valued, to be leaders that are great followers and support from behind, and really to develop greater trust, deeper connections. So we're industry agnostic, and we do everything from innovation sessions to leadership sessions to performing team sessions and
emotional intelligence.
And we have a flippin' blast doing it. So
that's right. If it's not fun, it's not worth it. That's basically what we the model we ascribe to. And we also know that there's data to support what happens when you laugh and when you're having fun, and how much more impactful the learning situation is when you are doing that. And so we happen to be naturally bent into the humorous side of life. And so we just keep that running.
Mainly me. I'm pretty funny.
Is it really?
I mean, mostly.
You're funny. Okay.
Okay.
Well, I know Tony has a bunch of questions, but I want to follow up on one thing you said, and then Tony, I'll turn it over to you. But how do you, I think it is a given to state that fun is more important now than it's ever been, given what's gone on in the last couple of years and continues to go on. So how have you seen that change, and how have you seen it embraced by the companies that you're working with? Because it seems to me like if a group of consultants can come in and do it in a fun way, that's just got to have astronomical results for companies.
Yeah, it's a great question, Betsy. What we find is that there's almost a desperation for laughter and fun. There really is this need for us as humans. What I love about laughter is one of the few things that's contagious, right? It's out there. If someone's laughing, if you think about what happens when you're at home watching a funny program, and then you watch it with three other people, and you begin this social relationship that occurs over laughter. It's just such a very specific thing that happens in the brain that lights up all these different connections when you're laughing, when you're smiling, when you're working together as a team in that way. So the team members that we see a lot of burnout. We see a lot of really tired people that are looking for new ways that they can connect together and come together and work collaboratively in a way that's as effective as possible. And that's where we kind of thrive, is because we can come in and say, hey, let's start from laughter first. It's going to be uncomfortable. And oh, by the way, the things that we do can be uncomfortable because we're putting you in situations that that are ambiguous, that are uncertain. And we've been in ambiguous times. We've been improvising the last 3 years, very specifically. So now let's have fun doing it. And people really connect to that, especially leaders connect to that fun piece of, okay, great. Let's do something that's fun, that's different than what we've been doing in the last 2 years.
Well, and I think our clients also, there's still this sense of, people will always invest in burgers, bowling, and a beer. You know what I mean? And what really transcends, I think, what we're trying to do to that next level is the fact that most of those experiences that you have where you go out and you socialize with your teams in a fun environment don't have lasting impacts. You might have a couple of weeks where it's like you do say hi to someone or you feel connected to them. And overall, it isn't lasting. Mm-hmm. So if there's something that we can do that is hitting the mark when it comes to team building and fun, and also has this great impact as far as shifting behavior and shifting language so that there's a long lasting effect, that's the difference. And I think even though, to Bruce's point, these leaders are wanting to bring in people to just like break up the monotony and the fear of what's been going on, they still want and need desperately a lasting impact, especially with remote teams and hybrid teams and the situation that we find ourselves in with just kind of this new, whatever this is. I hate to call it normal because that just isn't. And figuring out how do we connect everyone and make it meaningful.
Well, on that, I want to really dive in here because you said something earlier, Gail, about how you put people in uncomfortable situations. And then, Bruce is talking about the fun side of it. And to your point, I mean, we could go have burgers, we could go have some brews, and we could go have, go do some bowling. And that's fun. And it's uncomfortable for a lot of people, right? I am one of the worst bowlers you probably will ever see. But there's something that you guys add to the mix that I think is absolutely critical. And that's what I want to kind of focus our attention on here today is you put in the mix 4 rules that make a safe space. And because it's a safe space, and I learned this going through a lot of personal development work, I'm willing to be uncomfortable if I know it's safe. And I'm willing to grow if I know it's safe. And so I really want to go through these 4 rules that you have for the processes you go through. And for those of you listening here, for our audience here, we're going to talk about this because this is really knowing your customer. We're going to talk about how these rules apply to really knowing your customer from that customer service perspective. So with that, what is the first rule that you guys have and you put in place that everyone has to operate by that really moves from the uncomfortable and unsafe environment to a safe environment?
Awesome tee up. Thank you for that. It is yes and. So it is saying yes, and then the and is what you bring to it. And in improv, specifically in performance, that is literal. Right. So we are saying yes to our teammates. We are bringing something and adding to what they have created. And that then gets the ball rolling. Right. And in business, the way that we interpret that is basically welcoming either an understanding that is, I hear what you're saying, or I see this as important to you, or actually saying the word yes. Right. And then adding whatever you need to add. So, and the reason is because there's several, obviously, in improv itself. The reason also is that when people hear no or but, they are 66%, I guess, delayed in getting back to efficiency. So, if you say to me, if I come to you and I say, hey, Tony, I have this report. I'd love for you to read it over before I turn it in. And you say, oh, Gail, I'd love to, but I blah, blah, blah. I have a 3:00 and I have this and I have that. I've heard no, not I would love to. I've heard no. And now when I go back to work, it's going to take me 66% longer to get back to what I was doing to become efficient and productive versus you saying, this sounds really important to you and I have time at 2:00 tomorrow. Or if you can't or don't want to be involved in looking at my report at all, it's not your wheelhouse or whatever reason, you can say, I see that this is important to you. And I know that Bruce has a few minutes this afternoon to take a look at it.
I don't want to look at it.
Right. So it's coming from a place of agreement or coming from a place of understanding, not necessarily having to say yes to everything, because especially when it comes to our clients, and I'll try to wrap this up, they ask for everything, and, they ask for crazy things, mm-hmm. and they're pushing out of scope, and they're going to try to grab everything they can out of the relationship that they have with you. And so you're constantly trying to keep them within the baby bumpers, right? Harkening back to our bowling experience. And so the way that you do that is by saying things like, wow, I hear that this is very important to you. I need to check the budget, or I need to go back to my team and see if this is possible.
Yes, and that could be an increase in scope. We'll have to sit down and take a look at it. We didn't say no.
Right.
We said yes.
And they feel heard, right?
There's two things I want to just add to what you said, Gail, which is, one, the brain is uniquely wired to say no. It wants to say no to most things. It really is remarkable. There is a portion of your brain, it's called the executive judge, or the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. It's on the left-hand side. It's right up here.
Super sexy.
The prefrontal cortex, there's been a lot of studies that have been done recently in the last 20 years about what it handles. It handles long-range planning. It handles risk aversion, or avoiding risk. It's really, really important. It doesn't develop in men until 25 to 27 roughly, and in women somewhere between the ages of 23 and 25. It is wired to say no. So you kind of need to find ways to suppress that part of your brain and practice saying yes more often than you say no. One of these is this concept of yes and using that more frequently, because the more you practice it, the better that you get at it. One challenge I'd have to your listeners is if they could count the number of times that they say no in a day, they will be astonished by how many times they do that. And no, we say no in a lot of ways. Yes, but, however, still, we've tried that before. There's all sorts of ways that we couch saying no. If you could count that and then change that to saying it less while then saying yes and more, you will have significant impact in how your relationships evolve and improve. It just is really a way to do it. And then that second part, you kind of highlighting what Gail said about what happens when people hear no. So I say no often, and I hear no often. And there's this whole amygdala hijack that happens when you hear no. Your fear response goes up. It's a fight or flight, and it's just it releases cortisol. It's not a good thing that happens when people hear no. So. Sorry, a little more brain data than maybe.
No, that's
wanted,
awesome.
But the nerd in me feels responsible to say something.
So one of the things I love about this part of the conversation here is that a lot of my work in the past has been around working in customer experience on the consumer side, right? And there is a probably one of the most common practices when you get a retention call or someone wants to cancel, right? It doesn't matter what industry it's in. One of the things that most companies train, and a lot of professionals out there in my space train this, is respond to the customers like, I'll do whatever I can to keep you. And that's an example of a no. I'm not going to allow you to cancel, right? And people don't realize that that's the case. But why this is so important is because I worked for a very large company with everyone would know the name of. I was consulting for them, and I was looking at the reps who were retaining the most customers. And one stood out way above everyone else. He was like 80 to 90% retention rate. I was like, how in the world versus like the norm of 30? And you go listen to his calls. I actually took him out for a beer afterwards and said, let's have a conversation about what you're doing and how you do it. And what I discovered was very much what you've just described here. He would get the call. And by this time they'd been, escalated 2 to 3 people, right? He gets the call. He said, okay, I'm going to start the process. Click, click, clack. He's starting the process of canceling them, not arguing with them. He says, okay, is your name and da-da-da. Well, can you tell me a little bit more like why you're canceling? And so he's opened up with this positive, yes, I'll cancel, right? I'm not going to resist you, I'll cancel. And then he gets into this whole idea of, let's talk about this a little bit. And by the end of the call, usually there's an opening that he can let me see if I can get a better rate for you. We'll got the cancellation in process. Are you okay though if I call you back tomorrow if I can find a better rate for you or something of that nature? 9 out of 10 times, 8 out of 10 times, he's getting that yes. And so it's really fascinating to me because now I actually teach that type of process. Anytime I've got a retention issue that a company's having, it's like, okay, how do you say yes? And I didn't use that language, but I'm going to use that language from now on.
Yay.
Well, and I think you just hit the nail on the head. Your podcast, Get to Know Your Customer. If you are talking with someone, having this conversation, and they've already been, like you said, escalated to this place of kind of frustration, the only way to know them is to get them to share with you why they're in that position to begin with. Instead of sell, you need to solve, right? What's going on? And ultimately, if you do create that space through those conversations, and that actually is going to tee us up beautifully for the second rule,
that's right.
then you are going to be able to serve them better. So yeah, I love that.
Yeah, I have so many ideas going through my head thinking about, when we do these executive level customer advisory boards, how important that is when the sole purpose of the meeting is to get their feedback and to understand what they're saying. And of course, we always coach them to not say things like, yes, we've tried that before, and, and those kinds of things that shut people down. But what I'm really realizing is a gap in our training is that we don't tell them what to do instead. We just tell them what not to do. And so I love this idea of teaching them how to better manage that versus just don't say that. So thank you for that. So with that, go ahead, Bruce. I can see you have a thought.
Say one comment about the word yes versus the word no. It is incredibly powerful. The word yes invites collaboration. It invites you to come to me and me to come to you to work together. The and is a bonus, right? Just the simple word of yes. We don't hear it enough. We don't do it enough. It's just such a great way to connect that I'm very passionate about.
Yes. Love it.
See, look at that.
Yeah. Okay. So as you said, it was a great tee up for the second one. So go ahead and dive into that, please.
Sure. So the second one is listen with the intent to serve. So it goes beyond that sense of just listening. I listen, most of us here or listen with the intent to respond as opposed to serve. We get in our brains of, I understand what your problem is, so I'm going to solution it right now. I'm going to go ahead and say exactly what it is that you need because the first sentence you told me, and I've listened to nothing else that you've said after that first sentence. Right? I've promptly gone into my solutioning space and forgotten everything. And as a person in IT who comes from that space, who comes from the solutioning space, it's a very difficult habit to break. So listen with the intent to serve. Flipping the coin, if you think about it from improv, if Gail comes in and says something specifically like, I don't know, say something.
Hey, Harry, I'm here with my apple basket.
Right. I should yes and that. You will hear us build on these things, right? So yes and goes to listen with intent to serve. If I wasn't listening properly, I wouldn't have heard that my name is Harry, and I wouldn't have heard that she's got an apple basket. And if I hadn't been listening, I might say something like, let's go to the computer store because I want to buy a computer. Which has nothing to do with the apple basket that she just presented me. I've said no, and I haven't listened to serve her. What I love about the mechanics of improv is my job is not to be funny in improv. It's not to get the most attention. It's to make Gail look fantastic.
I love this.
The better that I make her look, the more successful we're going to be. That's serving not just her, that's serving the scene. So if she comes in and says, hi, Harry, I've got an apple basket, I might say something like, I can't wait to make cider because I love apple cider. Now we're collaborating together. Now we're building together. Now we're serving each other in this scene. Flip that to your customers. It's a very important thing, obviously, to listen. What I love about this mechanic is if you can do things like the 5-second rule, where you simply give space after somebody talks, so you don't jump ahead into that solutioning space, you just give 5 full seconds of space. It is remarkable what happens because people will fill a vacuum and you will just get more and more information from your clients. As an example, if you're doing, like Tony, you said, hey, I'm going to go ahead and start this cancellation process. I'd really like to hear more about your experience. 1, 2, 3.
Those are really long seconds.
4, 5.
Those were super long. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, and don't you find that people are really uncomfortable with that 5 seconds of dead air, so to speak?
Yeah. And there's a couple different ways. Oh, I just yes-anded you. There's a couple different ways that you can do that. Some people are really good about what I heard you. So reflection, right? Some of this reflection back or clarity. What I heard you say is it's too expensive for you. Can you tell me more about your contract with us and what is bothering you, or what is upsetting you, or what is, what is the challenge, right? So tell me more about reflecting back what you see. So if someone's even 3 seconds, quite frankly, Betsy, is better than just jumping right in. Mm-hmm. I know people who are listening to this podcast have been in situations where they've been on the phone, and the first thing out of a client's mouth isn't really what the whole conversation should be about. Right? Usually it's whatever's front of mind for them, and it's a frustration. So they think it's this one thing. And if the space is created through time or great open-ended questions, suddenly you're really getting into it. It isn't about it was expensive. It isn't about, it took me 10 minutes to get to you. It really is about the fact that I have too many channels. I want a smaller package. I want to stay connected to you, or I'd like this other channel, whatever it is, right? And that's what we're talking about. We're talking about stop making it about you. You are there to serve them. That is the whole point. And if they feel like you are fully invested in hearing them out and in finding out what's at the core of it, it will be evident and they will be yours forever,
Yeah. That's good. That's really good.
That's good stuff. That's right. That's good stuff.
Yes. And there's got to be more. So
yes.
I wanted to comment on this because I think it's a really fascinating way to structure it. If you're listening to serve, you're in a different space, right? That pause is effective, and the repeating back. And one of the things that, if you've been in customer service for a while, you've probably heard this. You should hear what emotional words are being used. And if they don't use emotional words, which a lot of people don't, then you listen for that tone, right? But you want to repeat back to them what you're hearing. You want to acknowledge that emotion. I hear that it sounds like you're stressed, or whatever it may be, because that right there is, again, it's serving them because you're letting them know that you heard them. And so I love that element. And that in and of itself just opens up more space for safety, that they're willing to. And I find it interesting. You talk about the 5 seconds and that, and I don't know how or when I adapted that, but I would sit there and listen to meetings, and notoriously got to the point where the last 5 minutes of the meeting, of an hour-long meeting, everyone else has talked. I finally chime in, right? And it's I can wrap up what everyone said, and they're like, wow, that was brilliant. I'm I'm just repeating back everything you're saying, right? But it also gives you credibility because you've listened, you've heard, you've played it all back, and people that were listening to respond missed what the other person was saying. And so when you repeat everything back and kind of consolidate it that way, oh yeah, we don't even listen to ourselves. I think a lot of times we're just talking and we don't even know what we're saying. I have to go back and listen to the podcast sometimes, oh wow, I said that was pretty good.
And what's striking me right now is thinking about, and you touched a little bit on this during the intro, but we're only a couple of these in, and I'm thinking this isn't just about, it definitely applies to relationships with customers, but it's leadership, it's personal relationships. It's everybody should know this stuff for every aspect of their lives. And I'm so fascinated by this. So keep going.
Yay. One quick thing before we move on to the third is, I would also challenge any of your listeners at times when they do have a customer or a client that is irritated, angry, frustrated, throwing their hands up in the air. There are times when all they want you to do is listen. there really isn't anything to be done. And yet we go immediately, like Bruce said, to, well, they clearly want to cancel. They want to stop the subscription. They want to fire us, whatever it is. So I think it's always remembering too, that sometimes they just need to blow steam and they need someone to truly be present there with them. And so you're just the therapist sometimes too.
Yeah. A good relationship manager is just a good therapist. Right? That's really very true. Yeah.
So it reminds me of my conversations with my daughter, because I'll ask him, do you want me to respond or do you just want me to listen?
Oh my gosh, that is so true. I make jokes with Bruce all the time in our marriage. I'm like, listen, on page 273 of How to Be Married to Gail Montgomery, it clearly states that I want you to just listen. Yeah, so he does that too. He's like, am I?
Is this a solutioning question?
I'm like, no, just listening. Okay.
Oh, good.
All right. So our third kind of rule, and this truly is kind of our rules of engagement, the language we use, how we show up, is support your teammates at all costs. And in improv, this is, to Bruce's point earlier, I am there to make everyone else look better. That is my job. And if I'm truly present and invested in that, then everything else falls into place. And when we think about the word teammates, with regards to kind of this podcast and how we think about the work that we do, it's both internal, right, within your organization, and external, your clients, your customers, et cetera. And what I mean by that is this idea that it's a we mentality, not a me mentality, is, opens yourself up to connecting to others on a level that is so much more powerful than just transactional. And I think thinking about how many times I've been in meetings where business units or people have been thrown under the bus. That's Bruce in IT. If he hadn't have done that, even I've heard people on calls with clients blaming another business unit so they could take the heat off of themselves for the client, instead of saying, hey, we got that wrong. We'll get that better. I'm going to go get everyone together. We're going to talk through this. I really appreciate that feedback. It's tough to hear, and we're going to do better, right? Whatever it is. And then the same internally, where you have these internal meetings and you, instead of blaming someone for not getting the data to you on time or not providing, product changes in time, you get to say things like, how can I help? What can I do to support you so we're able to meet this deadline? Or do we need to push? Or do we need to go back to the client? You want to add anything?
No, I thought that was really good.
I'm amazing.
I'm supporting my teammate.
Hey.
Really good.
Hey.
So let me ask you on that. When you say, how can I support you? Where do you say, here's an idea, like being more proactive rather than putting it on them to tell you how to support them? How do you coach people to say, here's how we feel like we might be able to support you, and try to get the feedback on that? Or does it really matter?
Yeah, I think it's a delicate balance, right? Because that's a supposition that you're making an assumption that you know what it is, as opposed to hearing about what it is and then making some plans to approach it. So I think there's a delicate balance of, let's just say Bruce was supposed to provide me with some data before I did something, and I didn't get it in time, and I had my meeting and I kind of crashed and burned a little bit with the client, right? I can go back to him and say things like, the report I was supposed to give the client, I didn't get that, and maybe I miscommunicated. What can I do to support you? So, it's specific to the thing I needed, for sure. It's not me saying, could I call you an hour before and make sure that you send that to me by email? Because I'm then making an assumption that it was about him needing to be reminded, as opposed to there being potentially something else that's at the core of it. What are your thoughts on that?
I agree. I mean, I think delicate balance is the right phrase. Right? It is really, you can't assume that you know what the problem was with the delivery. So it really has to be a collaborative discussion, right? Listening with intent to serve about what went wrong, and then how you can solution going forward, how we can make sure that doesn't occur again, with hopes that it doesn't occur again.
Yeah, and we've had some clients that we've worked with say, look, sometimes there needs to be some feedback, some difficult, tough, critical feedback to someone about things that didn't happen or went awry, right? And you can still, the whole idea of supporting your teammates at all costs is about finding that space to be, collaborative, to make sure you understand what created the 5 whys, or, what has created the reason that we're sitting here without the thing we needed or without the timely delivery, et cetera. And then it's supporting to make sure that doesn't happen in the future. So, and those, of course, we could go down the path forever on, great feedback, micro feedback, and conflict and all of that type of thing. That's a whole other bag of worms that I know people struggle with all the time.
I would say one other thing is, we all know, I think we have an assumption about what a good team looks like. So when we're talking about supporting our teammates, there are some assumptions that we make about what a team looks like, that people are trusted, and that you can trust them and they can trust you, that you are communicating freely, you know how to do that, that you have a framework that you can react to problems and challenges. All of those you need to create from a leadership perspective. You have to create the space to have that. The safe space, Tony, that you mentioned has to be created. If you think of like the Colorado Avalanche, for example, that just won the Stanley
Cup, people.
I mean, I'm not bragging or anything, but we're from Colorado.
Woo-hoo!
So if
support the team, support the team.
Support your team.
That's right. If you look at how they behave, it's not that they don't have their own challenges, that they don't get things wrong. They practice being a team, and that means they practice supporting each other in a way that is often very different than what we see businesses do. Often our teams in business are, you're breathing, you happen to be available, hey, go solve this problem. And if they don't have this kind of 4-tier framework that we're talking about with improv, if you don't have the rules in which they engage, it can take them longer to form and then get to a performing state. If you think of them getting on to doing successful work.
One of the things that I find really fascinating about this particular rule is if we extend it, kind of push the boundaries of it, and in the work that Betsy does with the client advisory boards, it's about supporting the why of the client. So, you're going 2 steps down. It's not just who my client is who is your client's customer? Mm-hmm. What is it they need? How do I support them? On the other side of it, I look at it and say, okay, if I'm, giving feedback to someone, they've got a boss. How do I help them look good to their boss? Or how do I help them solve the problem that they've got to take back to their boss, right? So if we can think like extend the chain of who we're actually asking about, I think that makes this rule really play out even better. On the consumer side, I'm just thinking about journey mapping here, right? For customer journeys, right? One of the biggest challenges that we see is people do the journey map and they're thinking about, okay, this is my customer and this is how I engage. And they don't pause for a moment and say, well, actually, my customer has 24 hours in a day and about 3 minutes with me. So what's happening in the rest of those 23 hours and 57 minutes that might matter to them that I need to be thinking about and I need to be asking them about?
Yeah, support your teammates. Yeah. Right? Or your teammates' teams. Exactly.
Yeah. All right. So lead us through the 4th and final one. And by the way, if you don't already have this in some kind of viable, purchasable framework that we could hang on our wall, I would highly suggest you do that, because I would buy that in a heartbeat. Because I think these are things that when you have a conversation like this, it all makes so much sense. But to keep it top of mind, I would love to have this right in front of my computer every day to remind me of these things. So just putting that on your to-do list.
All right, thank you.
We do have little challenge coins that have kind of the 4 rules on them. And I love this idea. I'm making a poster. I'm doing that this week. That's what I'm doing.
Okay, well, I want to be your first customer.
I love it. I love it.
Okay, so bring it home. Number 4.
Yes, the final rule is trust your instincts. It's around this concept that you know what's right. you know what needs to be done. Trust that instinct and go forward with it. We love the studies that have been done around what happens with airplane crashes, for an example. That there are typically 7 to 9 mistakes that occur. And unfortunately, some of those mistakes are brought up in the cockpit. So in the 80s, they did a study around what happens in the cockpit.
It's called captainitis.
Captainitis. There's actually a name for it.
Yeah,
captainitis, where a co-captain or a co-pilot would bring up a concern. And based on the hierarchy of captain being at the top, the captain would say, that's not a concern. And then it would shut down. Then it would stop. Now that co-pilot might have the instinct to even bring it up. There were some specifically in I think it was Korean Air. It was where they also societally have a very hierarchical structure, and there was only so much that co-captain or co-pilot could bring up before it was completely and utterly shut down. They had to go in. They went in and retrained all of these to allow these co-pilots to be able to bring up a concern so that they didn't have a catastrophic error. We believe that in business, we often listen to our instincts. We might even go so far as to saying something about it. And then if we get shut down, we stop. We still play along these hierarchies. In an improv team, anybody can collaborate at any level. They are all equal on an equal playing field. That's what we love about this, so that anybody trusting your instincts, knowing to step out, knowing to say something can be done. And then the other 3 rules engage. Yes, and listen with intent to serve, support your teammates. It's all there, assuming that you have the courage to step out and do something.
Yeah. And how does that play out? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Gail.
No, I was going to say, I find from a female perspective too, I find that gender, and I'm certain that from a diversity perspective, it plays a role. And it's also by title, your job title, right? We'll be in a meeting, we'll be in a collaborative session, we'll be working on a project. And depending on where we feel we sit or our value and worth, we say or don't say things. We have ideas that we say or bring up or don't bring up, or we have an instinct that something's not right, or I don't understand something, and rather than ask for clarification or have someone tell me what that acronym means, I don't say anything. And I think I should just know, or it's not my business, or I'm not important enough. And so that's also the piece that's at play here, is not just we know what's right, is having that confidence in yourself that you are valuable and you do deserve a voice at the table at the right time to be able to bring things up, to be able to ask good questions, and to get the answers that you need to be able to be productive. That was. And
how much does fear play into that? Like fear of the leader embarrassing you in front of people. Maybe you have the confidence to know that you have a valid point to bring up, but you fear the reaction of the other person that may be higher up in the hierarchy.
Well, you've just hit the nail on the head. I mean, let's be honest. The culture of your company is going to drive any of that, right? And attention leaders. We are in a climate right now where your time is limited. If you're in the command control kind of feeling and style. Like people are more discerning than ever right now about the kind of culture that they want to work in or they're willing to tolerate, as is evidenced by retention and recruitment challenges right now. So it's time to wake up and realize that you need to cultivate a culture where people can ask questions, can push back, can get the answers that they need to be able to be productive and to feel like they matter.
I was going to say, one challenge that I see come up a lot, and I'd love to get your take on this with the trust your instincts. So many companies have policies, scripts, procedures, especially in that customer service role. The representative usually knows, they're like, this isn't the right way to do this, but I've got to follow this procedure. What do you recommend there? How would you take that on?
So one, I would call out the trusting your instinct, right? So it's still important to do that. And the way that they can affect change would actually be working up through the leadership chain. So what I would challenge people to do, if they are required to do something based on their policy, the only way to change the way they do that is to change the policy. So going and coming with solutions. When I was a senior leader, I was always frustrated when people would come to me with a problem, who worked for me, who reported to me, and they wouldn't come with a solution. They were expecting me to figure it out. So what I would propose, and it doesn't mean it's always successful, what I would propose is that person going, I know this doesn't feel right, and this is why, and here's what I would propose to change it, and going and finding those right people to change policy, whether it's HR, whether it's the client service leadership, whoever it happens to be, to kind of hopefully have the forum to be able to do it.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's about authenticity. And just to your very point about it being maybe a script someone has to follow. I mean, for me, I would say this feels really inauthentic to me. I have an idea about a script that says the same thing, that gets to the same place. It's more in kind of my vernacular, my verbiage. Could I share that with you? And, would you be open to me trying that out? Because, ultimately, I think if you're authentic as someone who's providing that service to a client, they're going to know. And if you're inauthentic and you're not buying into the script, they're going to know. Yeah, so, that's it's a good point that Bruce has. You have to start somewhere, and usually it's with a solution and being honest about your authenticity and what the challenge is. Mm-hmm. Right.
Can you give us some examples of how this fourth one works when we're talking about really knowing your customer?
So I think I'm going to go back to being on calls or being in meetings. I'm going to tell a quick story about an experience that one of our clients had with her client. In that this was back in the day when people were flying the entire team out to a client to sell, right?
2019.
And flew the entire team to see this client for the pitch, right? And they were having this meeting, and they were waiting on the senior leader, the key decision maker, stakeholder, to walk in the room. And when she finally got there, she was late. Papers were flying. She was, not present at all. She had her cell phone with her. She was distracted. And because the team had spent so much money to get there and were so, engaged in getting this account, they just started launching in. And the head of the team, our client, kind of said, whoa, hold on, and trusted her instinct, because what she was seeing was a very disengaged potential client, and created space and said, it seems like something's happened. Are you okay? Do you need some time? Do we need to reschedule? And this woman was so thankful. She just found out her child had been in an accident. And so she was trying to fulfill her obligation to have this meeting. And meanwhile, it would have continued going on had the senior leader of our client basically not noticed, right? And trusted her instinct regardless, knowing what was on the line to create that space for her client. And that's a great example. You could do that on the phone. You hear things and it's not the right time, or something's happened and no one calls it out. No one says anything about that on the call. And those are examples of when you should say, whoa. Here's what I heard, and I'm concerned, and I want to make sure I understand what's going on here.
Side note about that client, they ended up rescheduling. They came back, I think, 3 weeks later, mm-hmm. and they sold an $8 million deal.
Yeah.
It was a huge deal. It was worth the investment. And it was all because, again, what Gail said, she trusted her instincts to say, something's not right here. Let me just call it. Let me say it. The woman may have said, no, everything's fine. Keep going.
And that was her personality, right?
Okay. It really is that, okay, something, and we often say trust your instincts with the things that are good. Make that leap. When I think of it from our perspective of making the leap to trust our instinct to build a business, right? To jump out and be entrepreneurs. That was instinctual and terrifying. Vice versa, when looking at it from dealing with a challenge, with dealing with something that's difficult, takes as much or even more courage to say something. Does that answer your question, Betsy? Are we closer?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great example. It's kind of like in that particular instance, what kept coming to my mind was just address the elephant in the room. If there's an elephant and everybody's feeling it, somebody can step up and trust that it's going to be a good thing to address it.
There was a great story.
Courage.
Yes,
I love the fact that you used elephant in the room. There was one. Yes, you did.
I just posted this on LinkedIn today.
Yes, that's right.
About addressing the elephant in the room.
Sometimes the elephant is totally ignored, and you need somebody to come in to see it. So there was there was an example. It's make sure to step over the extension cord. This extension cord had been in place for like 9 years. And a new employee came in and said, "What's up with the extension cord? Like, what's going on?" And everybody went, "What extension cord? What are you?" It had been there for so long that everybody just let it go into the ether of this is just what exists.
It's just there.
Yeah. Sometimes it's trusting your instincts to go, "Hey, maybe we should rerun power to the other spot so that doesn't stay there."
Don't you get logical with me, Mr. Montgomery.
I was just going to say this has been a phenomenal conversation. We've got the four solid rules, and just for the audience, can you go ahead and recap them really quickly so we get them all consolidated, and we'll have them in the show notes, guys. And then after recapping it, just give us a little perspective on how you think these rules and frankly how ExperienceYes, your company, what's going to happen over the next 2 to 3 years because of where we are today.
Great.
Well, all right. Recapping the 4 rules, we'll just do a little alternating here. Go. Number 1, say yes and.
Yes. So if you're doing something, if someone says something to you, caution yourself in saying but, still, however.
No.
Start with yes and move forward in that conversation. The second rule, listen with the intent to serve. Your goal is to listen and really allow that safe space to be created to get good listening going before you start solutioning.
Make it about them, not you.
Mm-hmm.
Number 3, support your teammates at all costs. This is like near-death experience when you're an improviser and in business. It's about having each other's back all the time. Have your clients back, have your internal teams back.
The last one, trust your instincts for the good and the bad, knowing that something needs to happen, knowing that you should be acting some way or moving the situation forward. That's what trust your instincts about. You may be afraid, you still have to step out on the ledge.
Ask the good questions, right?
So the second part of Tony's question was, how is this going to impact us? What do we see for the next couple of years, especially with thinking about it, I think, from an improv mindset?
Well, I'll tell you what, in 2013, when we started this business, we had a lot of mentors. And I'm putting, you can't see me, but I'm putting quotes around that word, tell us never say the word improv. It's a red button and blah, blah, blah. And no one's going to like it.
People are scared of it.
And I'm telling you, more and more data has come out to support the work that we do, the fact that it's experiential, the fact that we role play and it's applied improv. We get people to change behavior through doing it, right? Mm-hmm. And now we're here nearly 9 years later. And what we're finding is that we're on the top of the wave. People are interested in this. They want something different. They want their teams to change behavior. And they know that it takes practice and a shift in culture to do that with the language that we teach. And so what I'm seeing is more and more companies wanting to be ExperienceYes companies and have their teams be agile, connected, trust each other, and emotionally intelligent.
I would also say that leaders are looking for employees and employees are looking for leaders that create the culture they want to work in, a culture of yes, a culture of being supported, a culture of listening. Those are the things that are hot buttons for people. People leave managers, right? They don't leave jobs, they leave managers. If you're not creating this space of collaboration, this space of safety, this space of fun, those employees are going to leave. And we're going to see that over the next couple of years. We're going to see that great leaving of jobs. That's going to continue. And if you want to retain your employees, you want to put in these practices.
Cha-ching.
Oh my gosh, you guys. A couple of questions for you. One, will you come back to our show? There's much more we could talk about. I feel like this time went way too fast. Oh, Bruce is Hold on.
She likes it. She really, really likes it.
and our audience, I'm sure, is going to love this episode as well. Yes, and second question is, we like on our show to have the opportunity to give a shout out to good organizations that are out there doing good work, especially with everything that's been going on. We really want to shine a light on these organizations. So is there an organization that you would have an affinity for that you would like to introduce to our audience?
Absolutely. One of our very first clients was the Mental Health Center of Denver, or MHCD, and they've recently rebranded to be called WellPower, and they are in the business of pursuing well-being. They provide all sorts of resources for behavioral health, addiction, of alcohol, drugs, those that are unhoused. They deal with veterans, they deal with mental wellness issues, and they are a powerful organization making a huge impact. In fact, they started the very, very first national STAR program where they sent mental health professionals out with police officers to the city streets to address mental wellness issues directly, as opposed to sending just police to a situation where they may have someone who is in need of mental wellness help. And it has reduced the jail time for people. It has reduced arrests. It has significantly become the pilot program for the rest of the United States. And we are honored and blessed to have them as a client of ours, and also just ridiculously impressed with the work that they do.
Very proud of them.
Their CEO, Carl Clark, is a visionary. So WellPowers, their new name, wellpower.org, is this organization. And they're doing the good work for getting us all on the wellness track for mental health.
That is awesome. Tony, any final thoughts before we let them go?
I'm glad you asked for my final thoughts and not if I have any more questions, because we know the answer. Yes, and.
Yes, and.
No, this has been such a great pleasure. You guys are brilliant in the way that you apply these rules, and I love that you took in stride everything we threw at you in the show here of how to apply this from a customer experience perspective, getting to know your customer. And as Betsy said, I'd love to have you guys back and take a different path and see where we go, because it will always be a new episode, even if we talked about the 4 rules all over again.
Yeah, absolutely. Gail and Bruce, thank you so much for your time today. Cannot wait for our audience to hear this, to weigh in on it, and to learn from you guys. You guys are the best.
Awesome.
Thank you for having us, and we're thrilled.
Yeah.
All right, we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Betsy, I absolutely love this episode. And one of the things that really stand out to me is that it's not just about having fun. It's not just about building relationship. It's the framework that you use, the rules that you put in place for how you're going to communicate, how you're going to behave, how you're going to build relationship. That's what these 4 rules are all about. It's the rules of engagement, as they called them, I think at one point in the episode. And what that allows is, if everyone knows the rules of engagement and everyone practices those to the best of their ability, you create this absolute safe space where you can be more productive, because you're not worried about what's going to happen if, right? You're not trying to think through, how do I solve this so I don't get thrown under the bus, right? You know that people have your back. You know that the best is going to come out of it. You know that you can be at your peak performance in the process of working with your team, your customers, whoever it may be. So I absolutely have loved this episode and cannot wait to go back and listen to it again.
Yeah, same. Tony, I feel like we could have just talked to them all day. And I feel like that the things that they taught us in a relatively short amount of time are just so pivotal for how organizations behave and the culture that they build and how they engage with their customers, that, I have to think that taking this a step further, it's money in the bank. I mean, it is what will help a company be successful, and definitely want to have them back, because there's lots more to talk about. So with that, thank you so much. If you have not already hit the subscribe button, please do, and the notification bell, so that we can alert you when we have a new episode. And in the meantime, best of luck in your engagement with your customers, and we will see you next time on the Really Know Your Customer podcast.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Really Know Your Customer. We hope you gained a lot of value from being here today. If you want to learn more about the work Betsy and Tony do to help their clients thrive, visit Betsy at thecongruitygroup.com and Tony at tonybodo.com. See you next time on the Really Know Your Customer Show.